Good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Jamestown Public School Board to order. It is Monday, August 19th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room in the middle school. Please note that at 4:15 tonight, there was new member orientation in the district office conference room. We'd like to welcome all those in the audience joining us this evening. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Owen, would you be willing to read the school board norms this evening?
Certainly. The board developed norms are to share and respect opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached. Execute all duties of the school board in compliance with the North Dakota Century Code. Properly prepare for meetings and commit to assessing board effectiveness and ensure high-quality governance for all stakeholders.
Thank you, Owen. Moving on our agenda, we have no public communication. Are there any conflicts of interest the board would like to declare? Any conflicts of interest? Any conflicts of interest? If not, moving on to our consent agenda. At any time, a board member can remove something from the consent agenda. It does not need a second if there's anything that a board member would like to remove. If not, is there a motion? Motion by Steve to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second by Aaron? We have a motion, a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on to our regular meeting. We don't have recognition tonight. Under correspondence, we received a thank you from Christy Hillrood for remembrance for her father. Under reports, we're going to move down to board education. And we have strategic competency, Cognia accreditation. Mr. Gaylor, please come forward.
All right. So accreditation is something that's typically done every 5 years. We're in a scenario where they had changed standards, and I think due to some lag from the pandemic, we're a couple years off cycle. The new plan is to continue on a 6-year cycle, as I understand it, and so we'll be back on track with that. But this fall will be our accreditation, which is a assembly of lots of years of being able to gather data and then act on that data for continuous improvement. This year, we'll be conducting our on-site review on November 18th, but accreditation is not looked at anymore as a one-time event where a bunch of people show up and give you feedback. It's looked at as a process over time that's monitored, and so they want to see that we're engaged in a continuous improvement process. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about what does that look like over time, and then also what does it look like on the one-day on-site. So we'll end up getting formal feedback out of this, and we'll have third-party, sometimes educators from around the state, and then also people that are certified by Cognia to help review our evidence that we submit. And they'll do some interviews with stakeholders. They may ask some board members to do some interviews when they come and do that on-site feedback session as well on November 18th. That coincides, I believe, Dr. Lack said, with a board meeting. And so what's typically happened, I haven't gotten a commitment from them, is that their reviewer will offer some initial insights either right before the board meeting or maybe even at the board meeting, just into what their findings are with our accreditation. As I mentioned, Cognia changed their standards a few years ago. They've also rebranded from what was formerly Advanced Ed. And so that necessitated a new process, new standards, new process. They broke them into these 4 categories, which some of you may recognize, parallel our strategic plan, and then we have an additional one that encompasses resource management in our strategic plan as well. It seems to make sense to do that, and we received a lot of validation from the state when we presented our strategic plan at a couple of strategic plan development things. They said, this is what we're looking for, that clear alignment, so it's not a duplication between different things that we're required to report on already, and they are best practices in teaching and learning and school organization and leadership. When I talk about the actual accreditation process, it's a series of years of gathering evidence. So it used to be that at accreditation, you would provide all of these mountains of data for other external people to look at and how your school is doing. What they really want to know is, what are you doing based on, how are you responding to the data that you're seeing? So you take that data, you do analysis. This happens for us in our district school improvement committee, and then in some subcommittees at the building level. They turn that analysis then into information. They have to synthesize that down into findings, so you're acting on some very specific things that have come from your data, and then that is the evidence that you submit, or the evidence that you are able to provide for accreditation. So it's a much more detailed process, and they want to see the action associated with it, which is why I'm excited about how our strategic plan has been set up. They require analysis in 3 different areas. Student performance, obviously that's pretty key for us as educators. Stakeholder feedback, which is also key, which includes all stakeholders, and I'll talk a little bit about the process we use to gather that data currently. And then learning environment data, which is something that we actually do internally now. They used to send external observers in, but we have trained our own cadre of educators that can give that feedback within our own schools and on whatever frequency we want to take the pulse of that learning environment. The stakeholder data you may have gotten as a parent or a school stakeholder, a survey, climate and culture. Last fall we did that. A few years ago we did a couple other surveys. These are generated and they're created by Cognia. Those surveys, you can use any other survey that you want, but they obviously promote their own products. So those surveys go out. We analyze those in our district school improvement committee to try to find patterns, and from those findings, then we want to be able to respond to those. We also use the Vital Network, which Dr. Leck has talked about, which is an instructional staff survey that we use as part of our evidence, because that also includes a process for responding to what you're seeing. There's a building engagement process, and then they come up with their findings and they act on it. That's what they want to see. That's exactly what they want evidence of in continuous improvement. Each year we do a state student engagement survey. So that happens typically in January or February. And so we have now going on 6 years of data to look at those student engagement surveys. We can then look for findings within that and then find the evidence of our action in responding to those things. So those are the pieces that we currently use for stakeholder feedback and data analysis. This fall we plan to use a slightly different Cognia survey that we hope is going to be that much more accessible and get some better responses that we can interpret. We analyze student performance data, so this there's a lot of data that we collect as a district on student performance. we're able to take that data, come up with findings on a building level. So it feeds from the building level into what then the district needs, and we develop a improvement or implementation plan based on what those findings are. The final area that we have to look at is the learning environment. So to do that, we use a tool called Elliott, and that we train our own educators in that. They will do some external observations when they come for their on-site review, but the majority of the data that we're using is what we generate from our Elliott trained people that go into classrooms and then determine, based on that Elliott tool, where are the areas that we have strength and where are the areas where we have opportunities for growth. And you can get that feedback disaggregated out into, our teachers 0 to 10 range, just our social studies teachers, just our second grade teachers, our teachers that have 10 to 20 years experience. All of that you're able to disaggregate within Elliott, so you can determine which types of professional development might best support people in different categories within the teaching profession. So we generate that Elliott observation. We have the student engagement survey, which also contributes to learning environment, and then we evaluate that learning environment as well. Those three things, those three key areas that you're required to evaluate in, they come together in what's called a self-assessment diagnostic. Each building spent an entire day completing that self-assessment diagnostic, a team of teachers from each building, I should say, last spring. And so in anticipation of our accreditation, but also because that's the best practice, is to complete that self-assessment diagnostic each year. And then you determine building level priorities, which then feed into district level priorities. So rather than looking at accreditation as a one-time event that happens every 5 or 6 years, they want to see this incremental set of improvements, which is exactly how the board has set up our strategic plan, is to set those metrics and targets incrementally and to revise each year annually based on the data that we're getting within our schools. So that was wise the way that that's set up, and we've already had some preliminary conversations with one of our reviewers, and the question was, which consultant developed your strategic plan? And I said, our board did. So a lot of high praise from the standpoint of the alignment and planning, and I feel like it's really going to yield great results for us. We then have to organize the evidence that we've collected. So the evidence is the action we've actually done to address these standards. They don't want you to just load in any raw data. They want to see it analyzed and the evidence, and then we label those by folders by standard, which still needs to be completed before they start to review that in October. And then we compile all of those building self-assessments into one district level report. In addition to that district level report, we have to do some assurances, which is basically that we have licensed teachers and we follow best practices for that. We do an executive summary, which would be something the board would probably be interested in, that level of detail. And overall, where are areas of emphasis now and into the future based on that, the initiatives that we have going on, based on the outcomes that we have. We have to upload all of our handbooks, and so they can look at our organizational practices. They want to look at our policies and our governance practices. They want to look at our professional learning plan and our schedules for professional learning. They want to look at the evaluation process, and they will also want to look at our scope and sequence, which we've had a ton of work by our educators in the last couple of years, getting more surgical, really specifying what are those priorities and what is the scope and sequence that's guaranteed and viable for our students. And then they also will want to have a look at the budget and the budget process that we use. And so those are all things that are a part of those standards, even though it may not call them out explicitly like it used to. So that final district report, all of those things together would need to get submitted to them in October in advance of that on-site review date on November 18th. Those reviewers, once that's in what they call the workspace, they'd be able to start looking at any of our evidences and making comments, maybe even giving us some feedback or asking for more information in that time period in October as well. That's just a quick high-level overview of the accreditation process. It is truly a process and not an event, which I think is leads to better outcomes for schools. I feel really good with some preliminary conversations from one of our reviewers on where we're at, and would stand for any questions that the board might have.
Thank you, Adam. It's clear a lot has gone into this. Aaron, go ahead.
Just so the actual accreditation on site is November 18th.
Mhm.
When do you start submitting data in advance of that?
We could start tomorrow, but they want to see it at least 2 weeks before that on-site. So we'll have it done by October. Our district school improvement committee, each of those building level teams, and some of you serve on DSI, they've been working on the evidences over the last year and a half, even before that.
Dr. Leck?
Just a comment, some of the best professional development you can have is to serve as a Cognia reviewer. I haven't served since they transitioned to Cognia, but when they were advanced ed and NCA, working and going into other schools and doing the process that Mr. Gaylor was expressing. And we've had many of our administrators serve as review team members, some teachers serving as review team members. So it gives you a really good insight into the process, but it's also a pretty good professional development to see what's happening in other districts and what best practices are for them, bring some things back to the district. And I know that like I said, a number of different staff have served in that capacity in the past, and we continue to encourage them to do that if they are so willing. But it is a commitment.
Jason, did you have? Yeah, go ahead.
I realize it's every 6 years now that the official process is done. Is there anything we're required as a district to do annually, every 2 years, or is it just? I understand we're responsible for the monitoring, but do we do anything for Cognia in between those 6 years as far as submitting reports?
So the best practice is to complete that diagnostic self-assessment by building each year. And so that's what we did last year. We started collecting that evidence in the fall from our stakeholders. Then we did the student performance analysis mid-year, and then we did the learning environment analysis last in April. Then we completed that self-assessment diagnostic. What that should do is, if we're finishing that up by April, you guys should have access to that report, as we did this year, to say, here's how this information should influence our strategic plan. So when we did a revision of the strategic plan in July, some of that was at least based on that baseline data we were able to gather, and helped influence some of the strategic goals that we identified. We hope to have even closer alignment to that process so that you can see, here's what's going on in our buildings. This is how we need to help support and revise that strategic plan on an annual basis.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Gaylor, and
Yes, thank
you
you.
for the work, and we look forward to the visit from Cognia. So thank you so much. Dr. Leck, we have superintendent's report next on our agenda here.
Thank you. You have my written report. From the personnel, I have included that information as I do with staff that are recommended. And you also, in this meeting, have a request for release from contract. And, just a little bit of, primer on this. Whenever we have a request for release. I'm in particular very sensitive to those requests. And I will provide a recommendation to you if I believe that that is possible and reasonable to recommend a release from contract. I feel it is pertinent when these requests come before the board that they are followed by a recommendation from me. In this case, my recommendation is not to release from contract, and that is, and that perspective has been shared with the individual requesting to. And they know that that's the recommendation that I'll be making today. I do believe, and I outlined this in my report, that in the past few years, there's a few factors that are at play here, but we have seen an increased number of release from contract requests. Some of those have happened, or at least one of those has happened in mid-year. They happen every year, seemingly closer and closer to the beginning of the school year. And I have been a staunch opponent of liquidated damages in the past. And you know, if you're not familiar with liquidated damages, what they are, it is it would be in policy that states a request of release from contract comes with a monetary, a liquidated damage that the individual requester would need to compensate the district to be released. Now, I have been, as I said, an opponent of those in the past, and the rationale for that has been previously, if you look back in the last decade or so, really, in my opinion, the district has had the biggest, has been the final say on that, and I felt that liquidated damages are unnecessary because the district in the past has been able to say yes. If you say yes, you know, that liquidated damage has a very small impact on the district, but a fairly significant impact on the individual teacher making that request. And I felt it's been unnecessary. It's almost like extracting a pound of flesh. And I felt it's been unnecessary. And the reason for that is because in the past, the licensing body, ESPB, Education Standards and Practices Board, for breach of contract, if a board were to say, no, we will not release from contract, and an individual would be in breach of contract if they weren't here, the ESPB would sanction that license for a period of time. I believe it was 3 years. Well, ESPB no longer does that. They don't sanction, which leaves then the only next step for districts to consider then becomes the court, who we would need to adjudicate. And the feedback that has come from districts that have gone down that path and now are going through the court system in breach of contract has been about 50-50, which surprises me, to be completely frank, because it is breach of contract. But it's been about 50-50, and sometimes those are not honored, and the judge will say this individual should be released, and then other times they say they should not. So without that ultimate authority as a board to be able to say yes or no, I have shifted my thinking, and this is years of thinking. I am opposed to liquidated damages. Like I said, I felt for years that it was simply extracting a pound of flesh on individuals that oftentimes have good reason to request. But I am to the point in the last few years that I believe that the district needs to consider. Now, I do not have a policy that I'm ready for a first reading. I believe there's a process that should go to even have a consideration for these. We have a communications committee in our district. I would like to have those conversations there and talk about what's reasonable and what we could do. But I believe it's time that we at least had the conversation about liquidated damages in this district. We are one of the few that does not. I don't have an exact number on how many do and how many don't, but I know the vast majority of districts have liquidated damages policies, or they have them in their negotiated agreements. But I believe that there is a policy that could be created that is reasonable, that has levels depending on what time you're making that request, and that ultimately gives board's authority and to make common sense decisions. So that would be my recommendation moving forward. Again, I don't have a policy for you. It is more just sharing because I have been very vocally opposed to this idea, and so I wanted to clarify that for a reason, my thinking has shifted, and the process that I feel is best is to start with the Communications Committee just to share the concern and share what other districts are doing, and then we can move on from there. That's why we have Communications Committee. It is a two-way communication avenue. I think our Communications Committee has been very effective. The board is represented, central office is represented, teachers are represented, and let's start with the problem and see if we can find a solution together that works. So like I said, I don't have a policy for you. I am just sharing what I think the district needs to do, at least consider, moving forward in my rationale for that. So I'm just going to stand for questions because there may be some in this area.
Dan?
You mentioned that ESPB is not looking at breach of contract. Is there any context behind that? Or?
No. I believe it was a couple of years ago that just started, and I was surprised. It feels like it fits in ESPB's purview, but they, I think, had a lot of other things that they looked at, looking to streamline what it is, what their role is, and the board, and I'm speaking for the board, and I probably shouldn't, my assumption is that they felt it was outside their purview to make those sanctions based on that, probably because of all the factors that go into individuals making that request, and likely feeling it's a board's decision to allow or not allow. Dan, I feel compelled to kind of go back to what I shared before. There's lots of reasons why people make these requests, that's why I feel it's pertinent to come with a recommendation with what I feel and what I know based on the circumstances, how close it is to the beginning of the school year, how can we manage either with a new hire, should it be conditional, can we create a schedule that does allow that, and all of those things go into factor when I make that recommendation. But the recommendations are made thoughtfully, ultimately what's best for the district, but we do think about what's best for that individual person. We can't always make, I can't always make a recommendation to do that, even even when we're sensitive to it. But
Yeah, and I do agree. This is an important topic to bring up at the Communications Committee and get ahead of it. So thank you.
Any other? Jason?
Do we have anything right now in policy anywhere or written agreement anywhere that, other than the timing, how are we going to, as a board, make these decisions? Or is it going to be, is there anything anywhere that kind of guides us?
not now, and that's kind of the intent behind having policy that helps to guide us and establish parameters in which to help the board make the decision that they make. I don't want a policy that's so restrictive. The board is limited in making the decision they want to make based on policy, but there also needs to be guidelines. And when we have contracts, we have kids that we're servicing, and we have programs that we're implementing, and we have to have certified staff to be able to provide that. And there is a professional obligation to that contract. So to answer your question, no, we don't have that now. That's the intent behind wanting policy to help guide us. And many districts have samples that we can look at and determine what is the best practice for us. And I do think, as has been said a few times, Communications Committee is the right path for that because it gets perspective out there. And that doesn't mean that we might go to Communications Committee and find a perfect solution that everybody loves. And we might go there and not find that. And then the board has to make a decision based on policy that it makes sense for the district. But I think the place to start is having that open communications at that committee. That's what's intended for. And the committee has worked very, very effectively, in my opinion, in the past.
Melissa?
I definitely agree that it's something that I would like to see looked at. I'm thinking, have some steps in there, sort of like the sick bank, so there is some flexibility there, but there's also some very majorly drawn out, okay, in this case, this case, this case, this case, so that there is some kind of a guideline, as opposed to it's just kind of like, well, it's up to us to decide one way or the other, and it could flip-flop easily without those guidelines in there, so.
Yeah, and even amongst this board of 9 different individuals, there's going to be different feelings on the level of autonomy and the level of what would be, what one board member might say, oh, that's a reasonable request, another may not. And so we have to be judicious in how we consider that policy, but I think that's why you start where we're talking about starting, so we can make a plan that, at least is thoughtful.
Any other questions? Steve?
So you envision a policy that still would allow a yes or no recommendation, not just no with different sides?
Well, I think that, that's what I envision now, that there would be clear parameters about what would be approved, what would not be approved, and some latitude based, again, on common sense, that the board wouldn't feel landlocked into one decision one way or the other. You might say, you might have a policy, you certainly don't want a policy that says school started yesterday, and you have to allow this if $2,000 is paid in liquidated damages. You would want flexibility to make, if you make that decision, here's the parameters in which that's going to work. Hopefully that made sense. I kind of took a route to get there, but.
Follow-up, Steve? Good. Any other questions from? Okay, if not, continue.
Okay, and we met last week. We had a series of RFQs. We had great response from our RFQ for architectural services. We initially had 8 very, very high quality firms. It was difficult to shortlist from 8 to 4. And then we turned around and had 4 very, very strong presentations from those architectural firms. And we do have a recommended firm from the committee. You can see that feedback and how we ultimately made that decision. And that recommended firm is Icon, and that's further on in your agenda, and we can certainly talk about that at that point, but wanted to share that process with you and just reinforce that we had great response. 8 firms expressing interest is a large number, and they were very interested in working with Jamestown Public Schools, so we were very thankful for that. Staff in service tomorrow. Just a reminder that the board serves breakfast to our staff tomorrow. So it's best to arrive between 7 and 7:15. You are also welcome to attend the superintendent's address, which follows that. It's about an hour long. I have many different things to talk about that I'm excited to talk about. It's always one of my favorite times of the year because I enjoy visiting with staff about where we're at, where we're going, and I think we have a lot of good topics to discuss tomorrow, so I'm excited for it. And then we have other opportunities throughout the day for in-service as well, but you're always more than welcome to stay for that superintendent's address. Onboarding. Last week, we had 3 days of onboarding with our new staff. Let me tell you, they are awesome. The new staff, I was so blown away by their quality, by their participation, engagement in our onboarding, their commitment to us, their skill, They're a great mix between new staff, some very, very veteran staff, different levels of experience within. You know, sometimes when we think about, you know, new staff orientation, we think, you know, people in their first year or their second year. We have a wide swath, and they are really, really outstanding. I was very, very impressed with each and every one. We had a very large group in here. But, you know, one of the things that I wanted to share with you, based on the feedback from our mentors and our previous attendees in the onboarding, the orientation, we made some changes, and the feedback we got from that was very good. So we, and when I say we, I don't mean we, I mean Adam and others, created some online modules. So we had them go through some of that administrivia types of things, some required policies that they need to do, some other things. We built online modules, and they did those ahead of time, which we compensated them for. But then we were also, that allowed us to spend more of that onboarding time when we have them here face-to-face with their mentors, with giving them time, work time and planning time, a lot of time with their mentors to build that relationships, a lot of time with their peers to build that cohort. And the feedback we got from them was really very, very positive. So I outlined some of the online modules, or the online modules. You can see that we expected a lot from them before they got here. And so I asked them, you know, is this the right model? We're trying to figure out if this is the right thing. Without a doubt, their response was, we liked this. And the reason why was we got more time with our mentors, and we got more time in our classrooms to feel prepared, because we want them to hit the ground running. We don't want them to hit the ground to go, what do I do now? What happens? And so the feedback was really very good. And boy, I tell you, I was really impressed with them. You know, I got to spend a part of 2 different days with them, and very, very impressive. I know Mr. Gaylor feels the same. District roofing, this is a disappointing one for me. We had a delay on our roofing from one summer to the next, trying to get things done. We started in June, so we would get done in this year, and we're seeing a delay in this building. Louis L'Amour got completed, but only part of this building is completed. So rather than have disruption to our classrooms at the middle school, we're delaying again, and we'll finish the rest of it up. They're getting all of their stuff out this week now, and then we'll finish up next summer. So it's certainly a disappointing thing, but we are working through it the best that we can. After-school program, we have had an after-school program through the 21st Century Grant for a number of years. There are limits, and if you've listened to me talk about the after-school program before, you know what they are. We have there are big limitations with who can access the program, the regulations around the program. And for the amount of federal funding that we get, I think that there's a chance, and we'll have to do a detailed budget analysis with it, but I believe that we can come out ahead by offering it ourselves, not accessing those federal funds, expanding it to the building, Gusner, that does not have it, and I believe that we can still offer scaled fees. So the families that need that support pay less, either nothing or graduated up to full-time, but more to be done there, but there are real limitations with the program if we continue to accept federal dollars, and I think that we might be better off offering it on our own and then create our own regulations and manage the program ourselves. I don't think the amount of money over time has decreased, and I don't think it's any longer worth the dollars it's not worth the regulations that we accept to get those dollars. It's around $125,000 annually, which sounds like a lot, but with the limitations for billings, the limitations of the students that don't have access, there's issues with fees. If we can eliminate those, and then on top of that, there is potential for us to work with other community partners, and maybe we can leverage what's working in our community to offer those services. So I don't have a recommendation for you now. I'm just telling you what I'm thinking. But I think by January 2025, we need to have a determination. So that's something that we'll be working on. Over the next few months in meetings, I will be talking about there is an initiated measure, Measure 4, to eliminate property tax. There are many questions around how that would impact schools. Our new board members and mentors just went through an hour with me talking about local taxation. So they probably don't want to hear me talk about it again, but this would be, there are understandably many questions and concerns about what this would look like. And so I want to spend the next couple of sessions with the next couple of board meetings talking about what the measure is, what it isn't, what questions, what answers we know, what answers we don't know. And if there are, and I feel like it's important to educate the board, but we have public that listens as well, and give them a chance to understand a measure before it comes on the ballot so they can confidently decide what it is that they believe and go to a poll and make an educated decision. But if there are questions that any board member has on what Measure 4 is, whether, or any patron or any staff member, just let me know, and I'm happy to address them as part of my report as we look at what Measure 4 is and isn't. Okay? And then the last thing is a spotlight. Our spotlight is actually on the district this time. We've been asked by Vital Network to be a case study. They like the process that we've outlined. They like our commitment to how we are using the Vital Network to improve our working and learning environment. And they've asked us to serve as a case study for them, and so we are doing that. I know Dr. Larson is participating in that. We have administrators and teachers that are participating in that, in those interviews as well. So just sharing that, I think it's a good thing that shows that we are committed to the process. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions from the board? Jason?
The staffing issues, or how do you feel we're sitting this year, maybe even compared to last year? Are we critically short in any areas? I think all the time about like teacher workload. I know we're doing our usual extended contracts. What's your perception there?
Well, I think we are still struggling to fill all positions. We have done, I think it's a testament to our principals in the hiring process, a testament to our district that we are recruiting the wide swath of individuals that we had that I just referenced, a big group of people that are excited to be here. And so I think the quality is there, but every district is struggling to attract, and that's no different for us in special education, math, ELA. Those are all areas that we're still struggling. The specialists, our ELL, that's thankfully been a little bit easier. We had surprisingly, we had a large number of music applicants this year, where I know other districts have struggled mightily with filling those spots. I just had a phone call the other day from a district hoping that we had somebody that we could help out with, and we don't. But so everybody's struggling with that. That's really no different. But I keep coming back to the quality of those that we have gotten has been, they're going to be just outstanding fits.
Any other questions? Jamie?
Just to touch on the contracts again, is the district open to any liabilities right now before we have any additional procedures in place if we don't let someone out of their contract at all? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sure. Right now we are able to manage the caseloads with the staffing that we have currently. It would be concerning to me if we have fewer staff. I mean, could we manage? We could manage, but when I look at what's best for kids, it would not be, a decision in my mind that's best for kids.
Any other questions for Dr. Luck on the superintendent's report? Okay. If not, moving on our agenda, we have nothing under old business. Under new business, we have nothing under activities. Number 2, buildings and grounds. A, approval to hire Icon Architects. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron. Second by Steve. We have a motion and a second for approval to hire Icon Architects. Discussion. Any discussion? Aaron?
Just like comment on the process, I felt pretty robust, from the solicitation of the bids to the engagement with the various architects to the interviews that we performed. It was a really solid process, and I think it really brought forth a really good candidate here from Nikon.
Thank you. Thank you for the Facilities Committee work on this as well. Any other discussion? If not, should we do a roll call for this? We'll probably do a roll call for this since it's a larger project.
Okay, Melissa Gleason. Yes. Owen McKenna.
Yes.
Jamie Bear.
Yes.
Heidi Larson.
Yes.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Jacob Meyer.
Yes.
Dan Tweeten.
Yes.
Aaron Roberts.
Yes.
Steve Veldkamp. Unanimous. Pass.
All right, motion approved, so thank you. Moving on, we have approval of AIA agreements with Rhett Architecture. And are we okay with the motion with both these together? Number 1, childcare renovation, and 2, JVCTC addition. Is there a motion? Motion by Jamie. Is there a second? Second by Jason. We have a motion and a second for approval of AIA agreements with Rhett Architecture for number 1, childcare renovation, 2, JVCTC addition. Discussion. Dr. Leck, did you, or anyone else? Any discussion or information? Okay. Any questions? Okay. Chrissy, we'll go ahead and do this one as well, as long as we're under this area.
Okay.
So we'll do a roll call vote. Go ahead, Chrissy.
Owen McKenna.
Yes.
Jamie Bear.
Yes.
Heidi Larson.
Yes.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Jacob Meyer.
Yes.
Dan Tweeten.
Yes.
Aaron Roberts.
Yes.
Steve Veldkamp.
Yes.
Melissa Gleason. Unanimous.
Heidi Larson, yes. Okay. Motion approved. Under curriculum and assessment instruction, we don't have anything. Under finance, we have approval of agreement with Jamestown Park and Recreation. For the, yep, for the winter sports building, yep. Is there a motion? Motion by Dan. Is there a second? And second by Jamie. A motion and a second for approval and agreement with Jamestown Park and Rec. And Christy or Dr. Leck, this is like a little bit long, is it shorter or longer? The agreement was just slightly different to correct this year.
I think they switched that.
The start, they switched the start dates. Okay, any questions on that from the board as far as that goes? Melissa?
My first question was going to be, what is the price difference this year?
That's what I was trying to figure out.
From last year? And then is this agreement just a flat fee for, or are they getting charged ice time by the hour? Because I noticed it mentions in here, you know, prime time versus non-prime hours. And is that just verbiage that's in their general contract and it does not apply to us? And I'm not seeing anywhere on here where it says how many hours that encompasses. So could they at some point say, oh, well, you've used too many hours, so we're going to have to charge you more money? I would really like some clarification on what that 30,000 is buying us.
Sure. To get some of that, we would need to bring the contract back to Parks and Recreation to get feedback on. I don't have the answers to that, to some of those questions tonight. And it-
I guess I'm comfortable approving the contract as long as it doesn't change our current service. That, because I think what we've been doing has been working. But if there's something in there with the prime, non-prime, would change our current level of service or cost more, I guess, then I would want it brought back to the board for consideration, not that we, but I'm sort of, thinking as long as it provides the service we've been getting, What are your thoughts on that, Melissa?
I would like to have, like, how many hours
Yep.
that becomes.
Yep.
Or if service is changing, if expectations are changing.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from the board, discussion? Dan?
So kind of to your point, though, it's going to be a matter of, item 12, scheduling,
Yep.
and whatever is negotiated for those times. And that's, again, going to be on a month-by-month type basis, looks like, so.
Any other questions or discussions? So we have a motion, a second, for approval of the agreement with Jamestown Park and Rec. We have a couple of concerns if it's going to change our level of service. I am a little concerned about pushing this out because we will be, I'm assuming, for those that might have some kids in ice programs, we're going to be using some ice. So, Jason?
So not, right now, we're voting assuming no changes to
I guess
service,
that's
correct?
kind of, we could probably
That's the motion.
approve it and assuming no changes. If there's changes to service, then we'd have to bring it back or address it, yes. Is that, everyone comfortable with that thought process? So, okay, so let's vote on this with the assumption that our service is going to not change. And when we take this back to Park and Rec, Dr. Leck or Christie can have that discussion with them and just verify that our service, just the length is just a little bit different, and there's a couple little changes in there, just making sure that's not going to change our current level of service for that cost. So does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions on that or concerns that the board would like to share? Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the agreement with the understanding that there's no level, the level of service is not going to change. And if so, then we'll have to address that, the administration and or the board. So if not, assuming roll call vote for approval of this, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. So B is approval of lunch prices for the 2024 to 2025 school year. Is there a motion? Motion by Jamie. Is there a second? Second by Owen. We have a motion, a second for approval of lunch prices for the 2024 to 2025 school year. Any discussion? Dr. Leck, do you have any comments on this?
No,
Okay.
we did have to make change.
Yeah.
We know that from looking at our preliminary budget. It's never an easy decision to make to raise prices. I mean, we do it every year, but we had some larger increases, but it was necessary. But we never like to raise prices, but it is part of what we need to do to run a balanced budget, as balanced as we can be.
Aaron?
Yeah, that was my question, because the preliminary budget had quite a deficit on this. Can you quantify what that impact is to that deficit with these prices?
Yeah, we did an analysis, and with the changes in reimbursement and the increased cost for the paid meals, it's about $69,000 additional revenue we would expect.
What about summer?
Summer, that included
That
summer
includes
already.
summer.
That was already in the preliminary budget.
That included summer.
Mhm.
So, Jamie?
Do we know, is our free and reduced forms, are we seeing a lot more this year? Or can you give us some context compared to last year?
It's a great question, and I know Owen asked the question earlier today, too. We do the very best that we can. I think our food service does an outstanding job reaching out to families. We have a lot of different trigger points to communicate the benefit to not only the individual, but also the district of completing free and reduced. It's pretty early in the process for us to know now. I think it is, Owen asked the question earlier today, if there is some connection, or if there could be some connection between our summer meals and encouraging more free and reduced lunch for the school year, and can we get more applications that way? I think that's a a strong possibility that we can continue to work there. But more simply, answer your question. It's pretty early for us to know. But what I can tell you is that the food service department works pretty hard. They built a lot of connections, and they work pretty hard, and we get that information out in a few different ways to make sure that people know. And then it's all about making a choice. I'm still frustrated that it's an opt-in program instead of an opt-out one. The federal program, in my opinion, and I've shared this with Senator Hoeven, it should be an opt-out. If you qualify, you qualify. You shouldn't have to qualify and then opt in. I would rather see us opt out, but that's decades of change that we would have to be fighting, swimming uphill against. But yeah, I think they do their best.
Aaron?
So you said there was a $69,000 decrease in deficit as a result of this change, but that still leaves quite a bit of deficit that's going to have to be covered by general fund dollars. Is that correct? Okay.
And some of the rationale is how much we can ask of our individual families, and we are still seeing large numbers of individual family debt that we aren't recouping. So, we're trying to find a middle ground to that.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second for approval of lunch prices for the 2024 to 2025 school year. Assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. C, general fund balance, and D, monthly financials are there for your information. Any questions for Christy on those at this time? Okay, if not, feel free to contact her anytime. Number 5, operations, nothing under operations. 6, personnel. A, approval to hire for the 2024 to 2025 school year upon a successful background check and appropriate licensure. Number 1, Rodney Mack. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron? Second by Jason. We have motion and second for approval to hire for the 2024 to 2025 school year upon a successful background check and appropriate licensure. Number 1, Rodney Mack. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion approved, and thank you, Rodney, and welcome. C, request for release from, let me see. Okay, B, approval of semester 1 extended contracts for the 2024 to 2025 school year. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa? Second by Aaron. We have motion and second for approval of semester 1 extended contracts for the 2024 to 2025 school year. Any discussion? Jacob?
I would like to declare a conflict of interest. My wife is one of the recipients.
Okay. Jacob has declared a conflict of interest. Any other discussion? Okay, so we have a motion and second for approval of semester 1 extended contracts for the 2024-2025 school year. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. C, request for release of contract, Reagan Salea. Is there a motion? Motion by Steve. Second by Jason. We have a motion and a second for request for release from contract, Reagan Salea. Discussion? Melissa?
While I certainly understand that this causes some issues with the district, the thing that concerns me here in her letter is that she has extenuating mental health concerns. That, to me, is a concern. She also says in here that she wants to keep a positive relationship with the district, which to me says maybe once she gets her mental health taken care of, she would be willing to return to that. And I would hate to cut her off from that. We're very concerned about our students and their mental health, and we do everything that we can to help them. And I would like to see that we do the same for our staff and faculty. Believe me, the fact that it's special ed is very, very concerning, especially since it is very difficult to find people in that area. And it's also very difficult for the students to have those transitions, more so than your typical student. But just because of the fact that she has mental health concerns, I would hate to force her to stay in a position that is going to maybe cause more mental health issues on her part. So,
Any other discussion? Aaron?
And I think just based on the, the administration has had the conversations as far as the personnel and dealing with them and presenting to us a recommendation to deny this request, coupled with school starts on Thursday, and if this position isn't filled, it's those students that are going to be paying the price. So.
Any discussion? Okay. Jason?
There's no good outcome here. I think we all can agree with that. It's a tough spot. I've thought about this situation more than ever as far as being presented with extended contracts, because I like to use a blanket statement that we don't, if someone doesn't want to be in the classroom, what would be the point of forcing or I'm encouraged, though, that this is going to lead to further discussion about reasons perhaps why are given, or reasons staff put in for wanting out of their contract. This is just a really tough call for me because I see it either way. There's no good outcome here. It's just unfortunate that this is happening. So for me, I guess it comes down to what's best for the students, and I still sit here not knowing exactly what that is. I understand, and I totally get the contract thing, that it's a slippery slope, very slippery slope if we could not continue. But if we go down this road, it's an extremely Pandora's box scenario, so it's a tough call.
Aaron?
Another data point that kind of jumped out at me on this one too is this person is the first one on the extended contracts, so they are now approved for an extended contract in addition to their regular workload. So.
Jacob?
Given that it is so close to the start of the school year, do we know if the building has a plan to cover their responsibilities if we were to let them out of the contract?
They will, as I shared earlier, they will do the very, very best that they can, just like they always do. But losing one FTE on Monday night and school starts on Thursday, it's going to be a scramble. And that's one of the reasons the timing is a big factor in my recommendation. In being able to mitigate the loss of an FTE is going to be pretty challenging.
Jamie?
Are there any supports that our district is able to offer this staff member?
Yeah, we have our employee assistance program that we can offer any individual. We have mentoring for our new staff, a lot of different supports and disability if it's necessary.
Any other discussion from the board? Okay. We have to roll call this, I suppose, yeah. So, Steve, yes.
Can we just clarify what our vote means here? Yes or no?
Right now, is a yes or no for a release of contract is the current motion. So a yes means that person would be released. No means that person is not released unless there are other motions in the middle then, so. Jason?
And I realize we're always looking for more special, needs teachers. Would this be a scenario for a contingent upon idea, or is that not relevant here with it being so close to school starting?
Is my thought, I mean, this is, I think you're asking the question to the board, but my thought would be, that would be pretty tough to find a contingent response between, Monday night and Thursday morning.
I meant in reference, like, even if it's semester time, that's why I was wondering if that's even consider, if we could consider that here, if that would even benefit the individual. I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas.
Okay. All right, we're going to do a roll call. Christy? So yes means release from contract, no means the individual's retained, not released from contract.
Dan Tweeten. No. Aaron Roberts.
No.
Steve Veldkamp.
No.
Melissa Gleason. Owen McKenna.
Yes.
Jamie Bear.
No.
Heidi Larson.
No.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Jacob Meyer.
Yes.
4 yes, 5 no.
All right, motion failed. Moving on to policy and procedures. Approval recommended policy is, number 1, amended policy DI, personnel records. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron, is there a second? Second by Jamie. I have a motion and a second for approval of amended policy DI, personnel records. Is it DI or D1? DI, right? DI. That's why I want to make sure I'm reading that correctly. So, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Tuition. Approval of tuition agreement for the 2024 to 2025 school year. Number 1, 6, 9, and 10 grade students to Medina Public Schools. Number 2, 11 grade student to Pingree Buchanan Schools. Number 3, 9th grade Montpelier student to Jamestown Public Schools. 4, 10th grade Litchfield Marion student to Jamestown Public Schools. Number 5, 10th grade Valley City student to Jamestown Public Schools. Number 6, kindergarten and 5th grade Barnes County North students to Jamestown Public Schools. Is there a motion for 1 through 6? Motion by Melissa, second by Aaron. We have a motion and a second for approval under tuition A, approval of tuition agreements for the 2024 to 2025 school year, 1 through 6. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. 9, other. Nothing under other. And items for future agenda. Are there any items? Aaron?
There was a opportunity for a bus purchase thrown out there. Do we want to kind of maybe strategize on what we want to do as far as transportation in terms of, activities and normal, and kind of get a vision established? So if an opportunity like that does come up, it's usually pretty short term to make a decision. So if we have a strategy that might help us there.
Yep, I'll work on that. It might not be next month, but before next fiscal for sure. Yep.
Yeah. Do you want to put that to finance first and then come through to maybe come up with something? Okay, sounds good. You can, whatever. So we bring it forward. Anything else for items for future agenda? Any items? If not, at any time you have an item for future agenda, please let Dr. Leck or myself know. And we have some meetings to be scheduled. We have back to school breakfast tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. at the high school commons area. School board meeting on Tuesdays.
Aprons provided.
Yes, and gloves. So reminder, our next school board meeting is on Tuesday. It's on a Tuesday night, okay? September 3rd at 5:30 in Thompson Community Room. There's also a health insurance committee meeting September 9th at 3:45 p.m. in the district office conference room. Reminder, your monthly superintendent evaluation is Section 2, Board Relations, and Section 4, Curriculum and Student Support Services. There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.